My father sent me a text that said, "You're dead to us," after I refused to hand over my inheritance. What he didn't know was that I'd been paying off his mortgage for 3 years, and I was about to show him exactly what being dead to the family really costs. But the question is, when someone discards you like trash, do you walk away quietly or do you make them understand the true price of their cruelty? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and expensive cologne. I sat across from Gerald Patterson, my late Uncle Vincent's estate attorney, watching him shuffle through documents with the kind of precision that comes from 40 years of practice. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. "Ms. Torres," Gerald said, looking up at me over his reading glasses, "your uncle was very specific about his wishes. The entire estate, valued at approximately $8.3 million, goes to you." I blinked. $8.3 million. The number hung in the air between us like something physical, something I could reach out and touch but wasn't sure I should. "I don't understand," I said slowly. "What about my father? What about my brother Ethan?" Gerald's expression remained neutral, but I caught something in his eyes. Pity, maybe. Or perhaps just the weariness of a man who'd seen too many families torn apart by money. "Your uncle left a letter," he said, sliding an envelope across the mahogany desk. "He asked that you read it before we proceed." The envelope was heavy cream-colored paper, expensive. My name was written across it in Uncle Vincent's distinctive handwriting, all sharp angles and bold strokes. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. The letter was dated 6 months before his death. "Dearest Gianna, if you're reading this, then I've finally escaped this world and all its complications. I hope you won't think too harshly of an old man for the chaos I'm about to create. I'm leaving everything to you because you're the only one who never asked me for anything. Your father calls me twice a month, always with some new business venture that needs funding, some emergency that requires my intervention. Your brother Ethan has perfected the art of the guilt trip, reminding me at every family gathering how much easier my life has been than his. But you, Gianna, you visited me because you wanted to. You asked about my life, my stories, my health. When you brought me books, they were ones you thought I'd actually enjoy, not expensive first editions meant to impress. When you cooked for me during my treatments, you made the simple foods I craved, not elaborate meals designed to showcase your skills. Your father will be angry. He's been counting on this inheritance for years, planning what he'll do with money that was never his. Ethan will claim injustice, will say that as the son, as the one carrying on the family name, he deserves more. Let them be angry. You've spent your entire life trying to earn their approval, trying to be enough for people who will never see you as anything but a disappointment because you chose your own path instead of the one they laid out for you. Use this money to build the life you deserve. And Gianna, don't let them take it from you. They'll try. They'll use guilt, obligation, and family loyalty. Stand firm. With love, Uncle Vincent. I read the letter 3 times, feeling something cold and hard forming in my chest. Uncle Vincent had seen it. He'd seen what I'd spent years pretending didn't exist, the conditional nature of my family's love, the way every interaction was transactional, weighted with expectations and disappointments. "Ms. Torres?" Gerald's voice pulled me back to the present. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, folding the letter carefully. "What do I need to sign?" We spent the next hour going through paperwork. Gerald explained the various accounts, properties, and investments that now belonged to me. There was the primary estate in Connecticut, worth $3 million alone. Stock portfolios, municipal bonds, a cabin in Vermont, a vintage car collection that Uncle Vincent had spent decades curating. "There's one more thing," Gerald said as we neared the end of the meeting. "Your uncle set up a trust fund for your education years ago. You never used it for your undergraduate degree, working instead to pay your own way. The trust has been growing, and with compound interest, it now holds approximately $400,000. Your uncle wanted you to know that he was proud of your independence, but he also wanted you to understand that accepting help isn't weakness, I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. Uncle Vincent had known. He'd known about the 3 jobs I worked through in college, the nights I survived on ramen and coffee, the graduation I attended alone because my family couldn't be bothered to drive 4 hours to see me walk across a stage for a degree they considered impractical. "Thank you," I whispered. Gerald handed me his card. "Your family will likely contact you soon. If you need legal counsel, don't hesitate to call. Your uncle left provisions for any legal fees you might incur defending the estate against challenges." Smart, I thought. Uncle Vincent had known exactly what was coming. I left the lawyer's office and walked to my car in a daze. It was a 10-year-old Honda Civic, reliable but showing its age. I'd bought it using money I'd saved from my first real job after college, proud that I'd done it myself, without asking anyone for help. My phone had been buzzing periodically throughout the meeting. Now, sitting in the driver's seat, I finally looked at it. 14 missed calls. 23 text messages. All from my father, James Torres. I scrolled through the messages, watching the tone shift from curious to demanding to angry. "Gianna, I need to talk to you about Uncle Vincent's estate. Your mother said you had a meeting with his lawyer today. Call me immediately. This is urgent. Family business. Don't ignore me. I know what Vincent did. This is unacceptable. We need to fix this. You need to understand that this money belongs to the family, not just to you." The final message had come through 15 minutes ago. "If you think you're keeping that money to yourself, you're more selfish than I thought. Call me now." I sat in the parking garage, fluorescent lights flickering overhead, and felt something inside me crack open. Not break, crack. Like a shell I'd been living inside was finally developing fissures, letting light in. For 28 years, I'd tried to be the daughter James Torres wanted. I'd excelled in school, hoping academic achievement would earn his pride. When he dismissed my liberal arts degree as worthless, I'd gotten a job in finance, thinking maybe if I worked in the real world he respected, things would change. When he criticized my appearance, I changed my style. When he mocked my interests, I'd hidden them. Nothing had ever been enough. My brother Ethan was the golden child. He'd dropped out of college twice, started and abandoned 4 different business ventures using family money, and was currently finding himself in California while our parents paid his rent. But he was the son. He played golf with Dad. He talked about sports and cars and women in ways that made Dad laugh and clap him on the shoulder. I was disappointed. The daughter who'd chosen books over business school, who'd stayed in her rent-controlled apartment instead of asking Dad to co-sign for something bigger, who'd politely declined to work for Torres Commercial Real Estate because I wanted to build something of my own. Uncle Vincent had been different. He'd been Dad's older brother, but they couldn't have been more opposite. Where Dad was loud and demanding, Uncle Vincent had been quiet and thoughtful. Where Dad measured success in dollars and deals, Uncle Vincent had valued ideas and experiences. He'd been a professor of literature at Yale before retiring, never married, no children. The family had always viewed him as slightly odd, the eccentric intellectual who'd wasted his potential on teaching instead of business. But his investments had been shrewd, his lifestyle modest, and over decades he'd accumulated a fortune quietly, without fanfare. I loved him. Simply, completely. He'd been the one person in my family who made me feel like I mattered, like my thoughts and dreams were valid, and now he was gone, and he'd left me everything, and I could hear the timer ticking down on my family's patience. I drove home to my apartment in Brooklyn, a 1-bedroom in Park Slope that I'd lived in for 5 years. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The rent was stabilized, the neighborhood was safe, and I'd made it into a space that felt like me. Shelves crammed with books, plants in every window, art from local artists on the walls. I made tea and sat on my small balcony, looking out over the street as the sun set. My phone continued to buzz. Dad, Ethan, my mother, Elena, with her own carefully worded messages about family and responsibility and doing the right thing. I knew what they wanted. They wanted me to share the inheritance, to to divide it up like Uncle Vincent hadn't just made his wishes explicitly clear. They wanted me to be the good daughter, the team player, the one who put family first even when family had never put me first. The next morning, I called a meeting. I suggested a restaurant in Manhattan neutral territory. Dad insisted on coming to my apartment instead. "This is family business," he'd said. We discussed it in private. They arrived at 11 on a Saturday. Dad, Mom, and Ethan. Dad walked in like he owned the place, his eyes immediately scanning my apartment with that familiar expression of vague disappointment. Mom kissed my cheek, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Ethan slumped onto my couch without greeting, scrolling through his phone. "So," Dad said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Vincent's will. Would anyone like coffee?" I offered. "Gianna." Dad's voice had that edge to it, the one that used to make me scramble to fix whatever I'd done wrong. "Let's not waste time. We need to discuss how we're handling this inheritance." "There's nothing to discuss," I said calmly. "Uncle Vincent left his estate to me. His wishes were clear." Dad's face reddened. His wishes were the product of a sick old man who wasn't thinking clearly. "The money belongs to the family. I am family. You know what I mean. You can't possibly think it's appropriate for you to keep $8 million while your own family gets nothing." "That's exactly what Uncle Vincent thought was appropriate," I said. "He was very clear in his letter about his reasons." "His reasons?" Ethan looked up from his phone for the first time. What reasons could he possibly have? I almost laughed. The fact that Ethan couldn't even imagine why Uncle Vincent had made this choice told me everything I needed to know. "Read the will," I said. "We're not talking about the will," Dad snapped. "We're talking about what's right. Your mother and I have been struggling with the mortgage on the house. Ethan is trying to start a new business. We're family. We take care of each other. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. The mortgage. Of course, this was really what it came down to. 3 years ago, my parents had refinanced their house in Connecticut to pull out equity for one of Ethan's failed ventures. The new mortgage payment was crushing them, but they'd been too proud to admit the mistake. I'd watched them stress about money while refusing to downsize, refusing to make any changes to their lifestyle, convinced that something would come through to save them. Uncle Vincent. They'd been counting on Uncle Vincent. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want to see them lose their home. "But Uncle Vincent's money is not the solution to your financial problems." "How dare you," Mom said quietly, and there was something dangerous in her voice. "How dare you stand there, smug and self-righteous, and talk about our problems like you're above them? We're your parents, Jana. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. What exactly did you sacrifice?" The question came out before I could stop it. The room went silent. "Excuse me?" Dad's voice was ice. I could back down now. I could apologize, smooth things over, fall back into the familiar pattern. But something in Uncle Vincent's letter had unlocked something in me, and I found I couldn't force it closed again. "I'm asking what you sacrificed for me," I said. "Because I remember working 3 jobs to pay for college while you paid Ethan's tuition at schools he never finished. I remember eating ramen for months because I couldn't afford both food and textbooks while you took Ethan to Europe for his birthday. I remember graduating alone because a 4-hour drive was too much to ask, but you flew to California 6 times last year to visit Ethan." "That's different," Mom said. "How?" "Ethan needs us, and I didn't?" The silence that followed was answer enough. This is the moment I should have stopped. Should have asked them to leave. Should have ended the conversation before it became something we couldn't take back. But I was tired. So tired of being the understanding one, the easy one, the one who didn't make demands or have needs. "I don't want your sacrifices," I said. "I just wanted you to care, to see me, to show up. But you never did, and Uncle Vincent noticed. That's why he left me everything. Not because I'm selfish, but because I'm the only one who loved him without wanting something in return." Dad stood up. At 6'2", he'd always used his height to intimidate. It had worked when I was younger. Now I stayed seated, looking up at him calmly. "You have 1 week," he said. "1 week to come to your senses and do the right thing. After that, we'll take legal action. I have lawyers who will prove Vincent wasn't of sound mind. We'll tie this up in court for years if we have to." "Vincent anticipated that," I said. "He set aside money for legal fees." Dad's face went purple. "You ungrateful, selfish little—" "Get out," I said quietly. "Get out of my apartment." For a moment, I thought he might refuse. Then Ethan stood, and Mom gathered her purse, and they walked to the door. Dad turned back one last time. "You've made your choice. Don't come crying to us when you realize what you've done." They left. I sat in my apartment, hands shaking, heart pounding, and felt the strange mixture of grief and relief that comes with burning bridges you've been trying desperately to repair for years. My phone buzzed 30 minutes later. A text from Dad. "You're dead to us." 4 words. 28 years of being a daughter, reduced to 4 words. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the files Gerald had given me. Property records, mortgage information, financial statements, and I found it. The thing I'd been paying for in secret for 3 years, hoping it might somehow fix what was broken between us. My parents' mortgage. The one they were struggling with. The $6.2 million mortgage on their Connecticut estate. The mortgage I'd been quietly paying off every month, using money from my job, my savings, everything I had. The mortgage that, as of last month, was completely paid off because I'd made the final payment 2 weeks before Uncle Vincent died. I had the cancellation notice in my files. I'd been planning to give it to them as a surprise. Proof that I did care, that I was a good daughter after all, but I was dead to them now. So perhaps it was time they learned exactly what being dead to the family had cost them. I spent the rest of that Saturday staring at the mortgage cancellation notice. It was a simple document, really. Official letterhead from Sterling Bank and Trust, dated 3 weeks ago, confirming that the loan on 847 Meadowbrook Lane, Westport, Connecticut, had been satisfied in full. Total amount paid, $6,200,000. The house itself was worth maybe $4 million in the current market. But my parents had refinanced multiple times over the years, pulling out equity for Ethan's ventures, for renovations they didn't need, for the lifestyle they felt entitled to maintain. Each refinance had added years to the loan, increased the interest, buried them deeper. I discovered the situation by accident 3 years ago. I'd been visiting for Christmas, one of my obligatory appearances, and I'd walked into Dad's office looking for a pen. His computer was open to his email, and there on the screen was a notice from the bank. Final warning before foreclosure proceedings. They were 4 months behind on payments. The bank was preparing to take the house. I stood there, pen forgotten, reading the email over Dad's shoulder. He'd come in and found me there, and for a moment, I'd seen something I'd never seen in James Torres's face before. Shame. "This is none of your business," he'd said. Closing the laptop. "Dad, are you okay?" "Can I help?" "We're fine. Just a temporary cash flow issue. It's handled, but it wasn't handled. Over the next few weeks, I'd done research. Public records showed the refinancing history, the amount owed, the payment schedule they were failing to meet. I'd calculated their income against their expenses and realized the truth. They couldn't afford the house anymore. Not with Ethan's constant drain on their resources, not with their refusal to downsize their lifestyle. They were going to lose everything, and I'd made a decision. A stupid, hopeful decision driven by the same desperate need for approval I'd been chasing my whole life. I would save them. I would pay off the mortgage, and they would finally see me. Finally understand that I was a good daughter, that I loved them, that I deserved to be loved back. I'd worked out the math. My job at Morrison Financial Group paid well. Not millionaire money, but solid 6 figures. I'd lived frugally for years, saving aggressively. I had investments, a healthy 401k, savings bonds. I liquidated almost everything. I took out a personal loan for the rest, and I started making payments on their mortgage. I never told them. I'd called the bank, set up an arrangement where payments came from my account, but appeared on their statements as if they were making them. The bank didn't care who paid as long as the money arrived. Every month for 3 years, I'd transferred thousands of dollars to Sterling Bank and Trust. I'd eaten ramen again. I'd given up vacations, new clothes, dinners out with friends. I'd lived like I was still a broke college student, all so I could save my parents' house without them knowing. Because I wanted it to be a surprise. I wanted to hand them the cancellation notice and see gratitude in their eyes, maybe even pride. "Look what your disappointing daughter did," I'd imagined saying. "Look what I accomplished. Look how much I love you." Now, sitting in my apartment with Dad's text glowing on my phone screen, "You're dead to us." The fantasy felt pathetic. They hadn't wanted my love. They'd wanted my compliance. I made myself dinner, forcing down food I couldn't taste. My mind was racing through scenarios. I could still give them the notice. I could show up tomorrow, hand it over, prove that I was good and generous and selfless. Maybe it would change things. Maybe they'd realize their mistake. But Uncle Vincent's letter sat on my coffee table, and I kept reading one line over and over. "Don't let them take it from you. They'll use guilt, obligation, and family loyalty. Stand firm, stand firm." But firm against what? Against people who'd already thrown me away? My phone rang around 9 that evening. "Ethan." I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "What do you want?" I asked. "Jesus, Gianna, don't be hostile. I'm calling to help you." "Help me?" "Yeah, look, Dad's pissed. Like, really pissed. And you know how he gets." Ethan's voice had that casual, slightly whiny tone he always used when he wanted something. "I'm just saying maybe you should reconsider. This whole thing is tearing the family apart." "I'm tearing the family apart?" I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. "Ethan, Dad literally texted me that I'm dead to them because I won't hand over money that Uncle Vincent specifically left to me." "He didn't mean it like that. He's just stressed about money. You know the house situation." So he knew. Of course he knew. Ethan always knew when there was a financial crisis because it meant his allowance might be threatened. "The house situation," I repeated slowly. "Yeah, the mortgage is killing them. They're barely holding on. With Uncle Vincent's money, they could finally breathe. But you're being selfish about it." Something cold settled in my stomach. Selfish? Come on, Gianna. $8 million? What are you going to do with $8 million? You live in that tiny apartment. You don't even have a car worth anything. You don't need it. But Mom and Dad do. I do. We're your family. What exactly do you need it for, Ethan? I'm starting a new company. It's going to be huge. I just need capital to get it off the ground. Maybe $500,000 to start, then another company. I closed my eyes. What happened to the last one? The eco-friendly water bottle thing? That was a scam. The manufacturer screwed me over. And the one before that? The app? The market wasn't ready. And the cryptocurrency thing? That was bad timing. Right. Bad timing. Bad manufacturers. Bad markets. It's never your fault, is it, Ethan? What's that supposed to mean? It means I've watched you blow through hundreds of thousands of dollars on ventures you abandon the moment they require actual work. It means I've watched Mom and Dad enable you while criticizing every choice I make. And now you're calling me selfish because I won't fund your next failure? Silence. Then, you know what? Dad was right about you. You've always thought you were better than us? Smarter? More deserving? This money just gave you an excuse to show your true colors. My true colors, I said quietly. Ethan, do you even know what I do for a living? Something with finance, right? I'm a senior analyst at Morrison Financial Group. I've been there for 6 years. I was promoted twice. I manage a portfolio worth 9 figures for our clients. Okay, so? So I'm asking if you've ever once asked me about my work, about my life, about anything that matters to me. More silence. Yeah, I said. That's what I thought. Don't call me again unless you have something to say besides asking for money. I hung up before he could respond. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the mortgage cancellation notice in my living room. About 3 years of sacrifice that had meant nothing. About a family that had never really seen me as anything more than a backup plan, a safety net, a disappointment who might occasionally be useful. By morning, I'd made my decision. I spent Sunday doing research. I called Gerald Patterson at his home number, which he'd given me for emergencies. "Ms. Torres," he answered, sounding unsurprised. "I wondered when I'd hear from you. Your family has already been in touch with several law firms. How are you holding up?" "I need to know my options," I said. "For protection." "Smart. Let me ask you something first. Do you want to maintain a relationship with your family?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been asking myself the same thing all night, and I still didn't have a clear answer. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't think I can. Not the way things are now." "Then my advice is this: prepare for war. Your father is going to challenge the will. He'll claim undue influence, lack of mental capacity, anything he can think of. It will be ugly, expensive, and public. You need to be ready for that. What do I need to do? First, gather any documentation you have of your relationship with Vincent. Emails, letters, photos. Evidence that he was of sound mind and that your relationship was genuine. Second, document every interaction with your family from this point forward. Save texts, record conversations if legal in your state, which it is in New York with one-party consent. Third, get your own legal team. I can represent the estate, but you need personal counsel. "Okay," I said, my mind already organizing the tasks. "Gerald, there's something else. Something they don't know about." I told him about the mortgage, about 3 years of secret payments, about the cancellation notice I hadn't given them yet. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Ms. Torres, that's quite remarkable, and quite complicated. How so?" "Well, legally, you've satisfied their debt. The house is unencumbered, but you did it without their knowledge or consent, which creates an interesting situation. They could argue you created an obligation that they now owe you, or you could treat it as a gift, freely given with no expectation of repayment. What would you do?" I asked. "That depends. What do you want to accomplish?" I thought about that. What did I want? Revenge? Vindication? Understanding? Love? "I want them to know," I said finally. "I want them to know what they threw away, what I was willing to do for them, even when they never did anything for me." "Then you have a very powerful card to play," Gerald said. "Use it wisely." Monday morning, I went to work like normal. Morrison Financial Group occupied 3 floors of a building in Midtown. I'd been there long enough that I had an actual office, a small one with a window that looked out over other buildings but still qualified as a window. My colleague, Adrienne Harper, poked her head in around 10. "You look like hell," she said cheerfully. "Late night?" Adrienne was the closest thing I had to a best friend. We'd started at Morrison the same week, had bonded over shared cynicism about corporate culture and a mutual love of true crime podcasts. She knew about my complicated family situation, though not the details. "Family drama," I said. "Ah, the usual or something new?" "Something new." I hesitated, then gave her the abbreviated version. "Uncle Vincent?" "The inheritance." My family's reaction. Adrienne listened, her expression growing darker. When I finished, she said, "Please tell me you're not giving them the money." "I'm not." "Good. Gianna, I've met your family exactly once, at that work thing 2 years ago, and your father spent the entire time criticizing your career choices to my boss." "Your own boss? It was humiliating." I'd forgotten about that. Or maybe I'd tried to forget. Dad had cornered Bill Morrison at the company's annual dinner, telling him that I was wasting my potential in finance, that I should be working for the family business, that women in corporate America were just playing dress-up. Bill had been polite but cool. The next day, he'd called me into his office and asked if I needed to talk. I'd laughed it off, made excuses for Dad's behavior, but Bill had looked at me with something like pity, and that had been almost worse than Dad's criticism. I'd forgotten about that, I admitted. Well, I didn't. And neither did Bill, by the way. He still brings it up sometimes, asks how you're doing, if your family is supportive now. He knows they're not. That stung. The idea that my colleagues, my professional community, saw my family for what they were while I'd been desperately trying to pretend everything was fine. "It doesn't matter," I said. They've made it clear where we stand. I just need to figure out what to do next. What do you mean? You keep the money. You live your life. You stop lighting yourself on fire to keep them warm. I smiled weakly. I paid off their mortgage. What? 3 years ago, I found out they were about to lose their house. So I liquidated my savings and took out a loan, and I've been paying their mortgage ever since. It's paid off now. They don't know I did it. Adrian stared at me. Gianna, $6 million? 6.2. You paid off a $6.2 million mortgage? While living in that apartment? While eating cup noodles for lunch half the time? I wanted to help them. And did they thank you? Did they even notice? They don't know I did it. Exactly. They don't know because they never asked. They never wondered how suddenly they could afford their payments. They never questioned the miracle that saved their house. Adrian shook her head. You can't save people who don't want to be saved, Gianna. And you can't make people love you by sacrificing yourself. Her words hit harder than I expected. Maybe because I'd been thinking the same thing all weekend, or maybe because hearing it from someone else made it real in a way my own thoughts hadn't. So, what do I do with the cancellation notice? I asked. Adrian's smile was sharp. You send it to them, along with a detailed accounting of every payment you made, and you let them sit with the knowledge that the daughter they threw away saved them from losing everything. That seems cruel. No. Cruel is texting your child that they're dead to you because they won't give you money that isn't yours. What you're doing is called consequences. I went home that night and pulled out 3 years of payment records, bank statements, transfer receipts, loan documents. I organized everything into a neat folder, chronological order, highlighting the key details. The dates, the amounts, the total. I drafted a letter, short, simple, professional. Dear Mom, Dad, and Ethan, I received Dad's text informing me that I'm dead to the family. I understand. My refusal to share Uncle Vincent's inheritance with you has made me persona non grata, and I accept that decision. However, there is something you should know. 3 years ago, I discovered that you were facing foreclosure on your home. Without your knowledge, I arranged to satisfy the mortgage debt on 847 Meadowbrook Lane. Over the past 3 years, I have paid a total of $643,122.18 to Sterling Bank and Trust on your behalf. As of September 12, 2025, your mortgage is completely paid off. You own your home free and clear. I have enclosed the official cancellation notice, along with documentation of all payments made. This was not a loan. I did not do this expecting repayment. I did it because you are my family, and I loved you, and I wanted to help. I suppose I'm writing this now so you understand exactly what being dead to you has cost me. And what it's cost you. I hope the house brings you peace. Gianna. I read it over a dozen times, changing words, softening phrases, hardening them again. Finally, I printed it, signed it, and put it in an envelope along with the mortgage cancellation notice and a USB drive containing scans of all the payment documentation. I addressed it to my parents' house. I put it in my bag, but I didn't mail it. Not yet, because once I sent this, there would be no going back. No reconciliation. No fantasy where they realized their mistake and welcomed me back with open arms. This was the nuclear option, the final word. And despite everything, despite the text message and the anger and the years of being overlooked, part of me still hoped. That night, my phone buzzed with a new message. Not from Dad this time, from Mom. Your father wants to sue you for the inheritance. I've tried to talk him out of it, but he won't listen. Please, Gianna, just give us something, anything. Don't let it come to this. You're my daughter. I love you, but I can't lose my home. Please. I stared at the message, feeling something crack inside my chest. The house. It always came back to the house I'd already saved. The house that was already theirs, free and clear, because their dead daughter had spent 3 years and $6 million making sure of it. The house they'd choose over me. Every single time, I pulled the envelope out of my bag. I walked downstairs to the mailbox on my corner. And I dropped it in. There, done. No taking it back now. I went back upstairs, made tea, and sat on my balcony watching the city lights. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Mom. I didn't read it. Tomorrow, the letter will arrive. And then they would know exactly what they'd lost when they decided I was dead to them. I wondered if it would matter. I wondered if they'd care. I wondered if they'd even believe it. But mostly, I wondered if I'd finally be able to stop hoping for something that was never going to come. The letter was delivered on Tuesday afternoon. I knew because I'd paid for tracking, and I watched the notification ping on my phone at 2:47 p.m. Delivered to recipient. I was in a meeting with a client when it happened. David Chen from Riverside Investments was walking me through his portfolio concerns, talking about market volatility and risk tolerance, and all I could think about was that envelope sitting in my parents' mailbox in Connecticut. Ms. Torres, your thoughts on the allocation? I blinked, refocusing on David's expectant face. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? After the meeting, Bill Morrison caught me in the hallway. He was in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, the kind of boss who noticed everything. Gianna, you've seemed distracted lately. Is everything all right? Just some family stuff, I said. Nothing that will affect my work. Family stuff like $8 million inheritances? He smiled slightly. Word travels in our industry. Gerald Patterson is an old friend. He mentioned you were his client now. My stomach dropped. He told you about the will? Relax. He didn't break confidentiality. Just said you'd inherited from your uncle and might be facing some challenges. I told him you were one of the sharpest people I've ever worked with and you'd handle it fine. Bill paused. I also told him that if you needed anything, time off, resources, support, to have you call me directly. Something tight in my chest loosened slightly. Thank you. That family of yours? Bill said, his tone careful. After that dinner 2 years ago, I did some research. Your father runs Torres Commercial Real Estate? Yes. How's that going for them? I didn't know how to answer that. I'd stopped following Dad's business years ago after it became clear he'd never ask for my input or value my opinions. I'm not sure, I admitted. Struggling, Bill said. Commercial real estate took a hit during the pandemic, and they were over-leveraged going into it. They've lost several major properties. Word is they're barely hanging on. This was news to me, but it explained a lot. The refinancing, the desperation, the fury at Uncle Vincent's will. I didn't know, I said quietly. Why would you? They never brought you in on the business side. Bill's expression was kind but firm. Gianna, I've seen this before. Family members who ignore someone until they need something, then act like they're owed it. Don't let them guilt you into fixing problems they created. I won't, I said, and meant it. My phone started ringing at 4:32 p.m. Dad. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. Declined. Call me right now, then another. Call me, then Ethan. What the hell did you do? Then Mom. Gianna, please pick up, we need to talk. I silenced my phone and put it in my desk drawer. Whatever explosion was happening in Connecticut, I wasn't ready to face it yet. At 6, I left the office. My phone showed 43 missed calls and 62 text messages. I didn't read them. I stopped at a wine bar near my apartment, ordered a glass of Cabernet, and sat in a corner booth watching the Tuesday evening crowd. My phone buzzed on the table. A call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Ms. Torres? A woman's voice, professional and cautious. Yes? This is Caroline Webb from Sterling Bank and Trust. I'm the regional manager who handled your parents' mortgage account. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to reach out personally. My grip tightened on the phone. How did you get my number? It's on file as the payment account contact. Ms. Torres, I just received a very angry call from James Torres. He was quite upset about the mortgage cancellation notice. I imagine he was. He claimed it was a fraud, that you couldn't possibly have paid off the mortgage without his knowledge. He demanded we investigate and threatened legal action. Caroline paused. Ms. Torres, I want you to know that I personally verified every payment you made over the past 3 years. Everything was legitimate and properly documented. The mortgage is satisfied. There's no fraud, no investigation needed. Thank you for confirming that. There's something else. Caroline's voice softened. When you first contacted us 3 years ago, setting up those payments, I was the one who helped you. I remember you asked specifically that the payments appear on their statements as if they were making them themselves. You wanted it to seem like they were succeeding on their own? I'd forgotten about that conversation. It felt like a lifetime ago. That level of care, of selflessness, Caroline continued. It's rare, especially for that amount of money. I just wanted you to know that what you did was extraordinary, and I hope your family appreciates it. After we hung up, I sat staring at my wine glass, Caroline's words echoing in my head. Extraordinary, selfless. But none of it had mattered, had it? I'd saved their house, and they'd thrown me away anyway. I walked home slowly, taking the long route through Prospect Park. It was getting dark, the October air crisp with the promise of winter. Dog walkers passed me, joggers, couples holding hands. Normal people living normal lives, unburdened by the weight of family dysfunction and misplaced loyalty. When I finally climbed the stairs to my apartment, I found someone sitting outside my door. Ethan. He stood when he saw me, and I was struck by how disheveled he looked. His hair was messy, his eyes red-rimmed, his expensive jacket wrinkled. This wasn't the polished golden child I was used to seeing. We need to talk, he said. How did you get into the building? Followed someone in. Look, can we go inside, please? Every instinct told me to say no. To tell him to leave, to go back to Connecticut, to never contact me again. But curiosity won out. I unlocked my door and let him in. He walked into my apartment like he was seeing it for the first time, even though he'd been here just days ago. But now he was looking at it differently, taking in the books, the art, the plants, the evidence of a life carefully built on limited means. You really live like this, he said, and there was something odd in his voice. All this time while you were paying? What do you want, Ethan? He turned to face me. Is it true? The mortgage? You really paid it off? You saw the documentation. $6 million, Gianna. $6 million. Where did you even get that kind of money? I worked for it. Saved it. Borrowed some. Made it happen. But why? He looked genuinely confused. Why would you do that? For them? The question hung between us. Why? Such a simple word for such a complicated answer. Because they're my parents, I said finally. Because I thought if I could fix this one thing, maybe everything else would get better. Maybe they'd finally see me as someone valuable, someone worth loving. That's insane. Yeah, I agreed. It was. Ethan sat heavily on my couch, his head in his hands. Dad's losing his mind. He keeps saying it's impossible, that you're lying, that it's some kind of trick. Mom's crying. She can't understand why you didn't tell them. And you? I asked. What do you think? He looked up at me, and for the first time in my memory, Ethan looked ashamed. I think I've been a really shitty brother. The admission caught me off guard. All those businesses Dad funded for me, Ethan continued. The ones that failed? I knew they were going to fail. I wasn't even trying that hard. It was just easy money, you know? Dad wanted me to be this entrepreneurial success, and I liked the attention, liked feeling important. So I'd come up with these ideas, get him excited, get the funding, and then when it inevitably fell apart, I'd blame external factors. I know, I said quietly. You know? Ethan, I manage investment portfolios for a living. You think I couldn't see through your business plans? The water bottle thing was an oversaturated market with no differentiation. The app had zero user research. The crypto venture was literally just you trying to ride a trend you didn't understand. He laughed bitterly. And you never said anything. Would you have listened? No, he admitted. Probably not. I was too busy being the golden child, right? The son. The heir to the Torres empire. He gestured around my apartment. Meanwhile, you were here, actually building something real. A real career, a real life, and secretly saving Mom and Dad from losing everything. "Why are you here, Ethan?" I asked again. "Because I need you to come back to Connecticut. To talk to them. They're spiraling, especially Dad. He's talking about suing you for the inheritance and for the mortgage payments. He's convinced you're trying to manipulate them or something." "Sue me for paying off their mortgage?" I know it's crazy. But he's not thinking straight. The business is failing, Gianna. Like, really failing. He's been using Torres commercial as collateral for loans he can't repay. He was counting on Uncle Vincent's money to save it all. And now... Ethan trailed off. "And now he wants my inheritance to bail out his business mistakes." "Yes. No. Gianna, no," I repeated firmly. "I'm not giving him Uncle Vincent's money. I'm not fixing his business. I already saved your house. A house you still get to live in, by the way, mortgage-free because of me." "That's more than enough. What if he loses the business? Then he loses it." "Ethan, do you know what I gave up to pay that mortgage? I have $53,000 in savings, total. That's it. I'm 38 years old, and I have less in the bank than I did at 25. Because I spent everything I had trying to save people who never even noticed I was drowning." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Then, what's the house worth now? Without the mortgage?" "About $4 million, depending on market conditions. So they could sell it. Downsize. Use the equity to save the business, or at least end things gracefully." "They could," I agreed. "If they were willing to make hard choices and live within their means. But they won't. Dad would rather lose everything than admit he needs to scale back. That's not my problem anymore." Ethan stood, moving toward the door. Then he stopped, turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. For never asking about your life. For taking you for granted. For calling you selfish when you're literally the most generous person I know." "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. It didn't fix anything, but it meant something. "Are you really not going to come back? Not going to talk to them?" I thought about it. About driving to Connecticut, walking into that house, facing my parents' anger and Mom's tears and Dad's accusations. About trying to explain something they'd never understand. That love isn't transactional. That family shouldn't be conditional. That I'd given them everything I had and it still wasn't enough. "No," I said. "I'm not. If they want to talk to me, they know where I am. But I'm done chasing them. Done begging for scraps of affection. Done setting myself on fire to keep them warm." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's probably smart, healthier. Adrienne says I should have done it years ago." "Who's Adrienne?" "My best friend. Someone who actually knows me and cares about my life." The implications of that hung in the air. Ethan looked away. "I should go," he said. "But Gianna? The money you spent on the mortgage. I know you said it wasn't a loan, but if you ever need help, if you're ever struggling, I'll be fine," I said. "I always am." After he left, I sat in my quiet apartment and let myself feel the weight of everything. The relief of finally standing up for myself. The grief of losing a family I'd never really had. The strange emptiness of watching a chapter close after 38 years of trying to write a different ending. My phone buzzed. Dad again. This time I read the message. "You think you're clever, don't you? Throwing this in our faces. You're still the same spiteful, manipulative child you always were. That money should have been mine. Vincent was my brother. You poisoned him against his own family. We will fight this. We will take what's rightfully ours. And you will lose everything." I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Gerald Patterson with a simple note. "For the file." Then I blocked my father's number. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. The lawsuit came 3 weeks later. I was served at work, which I'm sure was intentional. The process server showed up at Morrison Financial Group's reception desk, asked for me by name, and handed me a thick envelope in front of half the office. "Gianna Torres? You've been served." Everyone pretended not to stare as I walked back to my office with the papers. But I felt their eyes following me, and heard the whispers starting before I even closed my door. Inside the envelope were 47 pages of legal documents. Torres v. Torres. My father was suing me for undue influence over Uncle Vincent, claiming I'd manipulated a vulnerable elderly man into changing his will. He was also, and this part made me laugh despite everything, suing me for unauthorized mortgage payments and claiming I'd created a debt they now owed me, which should be offset against the inheritance. The legal gymnastics were impressive. Dad wanted Uncle Vincent's money, but also wanted to claim I'd wronged them by paying off their house. Somehow, in his mind, both things were true simultaneously. Gerald called me an hour later. "I see you received the complaint." "It's creative," I said. "Contradictory, but creative. Your father hired Rebecca Stanton. She's aggressive, expensive, and very good at what she does. This is going to get ugly, Gianna." "How ugly?" "They're going to depose everyone who knew Vincent. They'll go through his medical records, looking for any sign of cognitive decline. They'll question every interaction you had with him, looking for evidence of manipulation. And they'll make your life very public and very uncomfortable." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. What are my chances? Of winning? Excellent. Vincent was examined by 3 different doctors in the 6 months before his death. All confirmed he was sharp as ever. His will is ironclad, and there's extensive documentation of his reasoning. Plus, you have his letter explaining everything. Gerald paused. But winning and surviving the process are 2 different things. This could take 2 years. Maybe more. It'll cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees, and it will destroy whatever relationship you might still salvage with your family. There's no relationship left to salvage, I said quietly. Then we fight. I hired my own attorney that week. Patricia Moreno came highly recommended by Gerald. Mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when protecting her clients. We met in her office in downtown Manhattan, and I walked her through everything. "Your father's argument is weak," Patricia said after reviewing all the documents. "But weak arguments can still cause damage. The mortgage situation is particularly interesting." "How so?" "You paid off a debt without their knowledge or consent. Legally, that's a gift, unless you can prove there was an agreement for repayment. Your letter explicitly states it was not a loan. That protects you from them claiming you created a debt. But it also means you can't use it as leverage." "I don't want to use it as leverage," I said. "I just wanted them to know." "Good, because we're going to use it differently. We're going to show a pattern of you being incredibly generous to your family without expectation of return. It directly contradicts their narrative of you as manipulative and self-serving." Patricia smiled. "Your father's attorney is going to hate this. The deposition started in December. They deposed Ethan first. He called me afterward, sounding exhausted. That was brutal, he said. 5 hours of questions about you and Uncle Vincent. They kept trying to get me to say you were scheming or that Vincent was senile. I didn't give them what they wanted. Thank you, I said, surprised. I meant what I said before. I'm done being part of Dad's crusade against you. It's wrong, and I told him so. We're not exactly speaking right now. Ethan, I'm sorry. Don't be. This is on him, not you. He's so obsessed with winning, with being right, that he can't see he's destroying what's left of this family. Ethan sighed. Mom's a mess. She wants Dad to drop the lawsuit, but he won't listen. She's caught in the middle. She chose a side, I said, and I tried not to let it hurt. She could have stood up for me. She didn't, I know. They deposed me in January. 6 hours in a conference room with Rebecca Stanton and her associate firing questions at me. Patricia sat beside me, occasionally objecting, mostly letting me answer. Miss Torres, how often did you visit your uncle in the year before his death? Weekly, sometimes twice a week. And during these visits, did you discuss his will? Never. Never? Not once in dozens of visits? Not once. Uncle Vincent talked about books, current events, his memories. We talked about my work sometimes, but never about money or inheritance. But you knew you were in the will. I knew he'd set up a trust fund for my education years ago. I didn't know about the rest until after he died. Rebecca leaned forward. Ms. Torres, isn't it true that you paid off your parents' mortgage specifically to demonstrate your financial responsibility, knowing it would reflect well on you as an inheritor? Patricia started to object, but I touched her arm. No, I said clearly. I paid off their mortgage because I loved them and I didn't want them to lose their home. I never told them I did it. I never told Uncle Vincent I did it. The only people who knew were me and the bank. So how exactly would it reflect well on me if nobody knew about it? Rebecca's expression tightened. She'd walked right into that one. The deposition ended with Rebecca trying to paint me as cold and calculating. Patricia looked pleased as we left. You did well, she said. Calm, consistent, genuine. The recordings will help us. Recordings? They record all depositions. If this goes to trial, the jury will see those recordings. They'll see a daughter who loved her uncle and her parents trying to explain why that somehow makes her a villain. It plays well. In February, they deposed Uncle Vincent's doctors, his neighbors, and his former colleagues from Yale. Everyone confirmed the same thing. Vincent Torres had been sharp, independent, and very clear about his wishes until the day he died. The lawsuit started falling apart. But my life was still chaotic. The case had made it into the local Connecticut papers. Local business owner sues daughter over brother's $8 estate. The articles were careful to present both sides, but the comment sections were brutal. People who didn't know me, didn't know my family, felt entitled to judge everything. Work became a refuge. Bill Morrison continued to be supportive, even as some clients asked uncomfortable questions about my family situation. I threw myself into my portfolios, working late, taking on extra projects, anything to avoid going home to my empty apartment and the weight of everything I'd lost. Adrienne dragged me out for drinks one evening in March. We sat in a wine bar in the West Village, and she studied me with concern. You look terrible, she said bluntly. Thanks. I'm serious. You've lost weight. You're exhausted. This lawsuit is eating you alive. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're surviving. There's a difference. Adrienne took a sip of her wine. Have you thought about what you're going to do after this is over? After? When you win? Because you will win. Patricia says it's basically certain at this point. Your dad's case is falling apart. So what happens then? You have $8 million and no family. What's the plan? I'd been so focused on the immediate crisis that I hadn't thought beyond it. What did I want? What did I do with freedom I'd never really had before? I don't know, I admitted. Well, start thinking about it. Because one way or another this ends, and you need to have a life waiting for you when it does. That night, I went home and actually looked at my finances for the first time in months. Between the inheritance and my savings, I had resources I'd never imagined having. But I was still living like I was broke. Still trapped in the scarcity mindset of someone who'd spent 3 years funneling every dollar toward someone else's mortgage. I opened my laptop and started researching. Not investment strategies or financial planning. I knew all that. But other things. Programs I'd always wanted to pursue. Places I'd always wanted to go. Dreams I'd set aside because they seemed impractical or because my family would disapprove. I found a creative writing MFA program at Columbia. I'd always wanted to write and had notebooks full of stories I'd never finished. My literature degree from college had been a compromise. I'd wanted to study creative writing, but Dad had insisted on something more marketable. I found volunteer opportunities with literacy programs in underserved communities. I'd tutored kids for free during college and loved it, but had stopped after graduation when work consumed my life. I found information about buying property upstate. A small house with land, somewhere quiet where I could breathe. Possibilities. For the first time in years, I saw possibilities instead of just obligations. In April, Rebecca Stanton filed a motion to dismiss her own case. The evidence was too clear, the argument too weak. She couldn't win, and continuing would just rack up fees for my father that he couldn't afford. James Torres refused. He's going to trial, Gerald told me over the phone, against his attorney's advice. He's convinced that once a jury hears his side, they'll see things his way. That's insane. Yes, but it's his right. Patricia says we'll be ready. The trial is scheduled for September. 6 more months of my life consumed by this. 6 more months of my father's hatred and my Mother's silence and the weight of a family that had never really been mine, but also 6 months to build something new. I signed up for a writing workshop that met Tuesday evenings, just a community class, nothing formal, but it felt rebellious in a way I couldn't quite explain. I was doing something purely for myself, something that had no financial benefit, no practical application, something Dad would dismiss as a waste of time. I started volunteering at a literacy center in the Bronx on Saturday mornings, working with teenagers who were learning English. Their determination reminded me of my younger self, trying so hard to be enough to prove their worth. "Why do you do this?" One student, Maria, asked me. "You have a good job. You don't need to be here." "I want to be here," I said simply. That's reason enough. In May, my mother called from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Gianna?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Hi, Mom. Your father doesn't know I'm calling. I'm at the grocery store using a friend's phone." She paused. "I want you to know I don't agree with the lawsuit." "I never did. I've told him to stop, but he won't listen." "Then leave him." Silence. "Mom, you don't have to stay in a situation that makes you miserable. You have a house with no mortgage. You could sell it, take your share, start over. He's my husband. We've been married 35 years. And that's supposed to mean what? That you're obligated to support him even when he's wrong? Even when he's destroying the family? It's not that simple. It really is, though. You're choosing him over me, just like you always have. Just like you did when he texted me that I was dead to the family and you said nothing. Just like you did when he filed this lawsuit and you stood by silently. Gianna, please. No, Mom, I'm done. If you want a relationship with me, you know what you need to do. Until then, don't call. I hung up. My hands were shaking. But I didn't feel guilty. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. That evening, I got an email from Ethan with the subject line, "You should see this." Inside was a link to a real estate listing. 847 Meadowbrook Lane, Westport, Connecticut. Listed for $3.9 million. My parents were selling the house. The house I'd saved. The house they'd almost lost to foreclosure. The house I'd spent $6 million and 3 years of my life protecting. They were selling it to fund the lawsuit against me. I called Ethan immediately. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Dad listed it yesterday. Mom's devastated, but he says it's necessary. He needs the money for legal fees and to save Torres Commercial. He's going to burn through $4 million on a lawsuit he can't win and a business that's already failed? Apparently." I told him it was insane. We had a huge fight. He told me if I didn't support him, I could get out. "Where are you going to go?" "I'm 32 years old, Gianna. I should have moved out years ago. I'm looking at apartments in New Haven. Going to finally finish my degree at Southern Connecticut State. Maybe figure out who I am when I'm not playing the golden child." Despite everything, I felt a surge of pride. "Good for you." "Yeah, well, you inspired me. Watching you stand up for yourself, set boundaries, build a life on your own terms. I want that. I'm tired of being Dad's puppet." After we hung up, I sat with the knowledge that my parents were selling the house that represented my biggest sacrifice, my deepest hope that I could fix things. And I realized something. I didn't care. Not anymore. It was just a house. An expensive pile of bricks and wood that had never been a home. Not really. Let them sell it. Let them waste the money. It wasn't my problem. I was finally free. The trial began on a Tuesday in September, in a courthouse in Hartford that smelled like floor polish and old paper. I wore a navy suit that Patricia had approved, professional but not flashy, the kind of outfit that said responsible adult without screaming, "I have money." My father sat on the opposite side of the courtroom with Rebecca Stanton and her team. He'd aged in the months since I'd last seen him. His hair was grayer, his face harder. He didn't look at me once during jury selection. My mother wasn't there. Ethan had told me she'd wanted to come, to support both of us somehow, but Dad had forbidden it. "If you show up, you're choosing her over me," he'd said. So she stayed in the hotel room they couldn't really afford, waiting for updates. The jury was selected by Wednesday afternoon. 7 women, 5 men, ages ranging from early 20s to late 60s. A teacher, a retired postal worker, a small business owner, an accountant, a nurse, a software developer, and 6 others whose occupations I tried to memorize but immediately forgot in the stress of it all. Rebecca Stanton's opening statement was compelling, I had to admit. She painted a picture of a vulnerable elderly man, isolated and sick, manipulated by a cunning niece who'd wormed her way into his affections while his real family was kept at arm's length. Vincent Torres was dying, Rebecca said, her voice carrying through the courtroom. He was in pain, on medications that affected his judgment, and he was lonely. And Gianna Torres took advantage of that loneliness. She visited frequently, yes. She brought him books and food and company. But why? Out of love? Or out of a calculated plan to ensure she would inherit everything while his own brother, his own flesh and blood, would get nothing? She made it sound sinister. Every kindness I'd shown Uncle Vincent became evidence of manipulation. Every visit became proof of my scheme. Patricia's opening was different, quieter, more personal. This case is about a simple question, she began. Did Vincent Torres have the right to leave his money to whomever he chose? The answer, under our law, is yes. He absolutely did. And he chose his niece, Gianna, because she was the only family member who loved him without conditions, without expectations, without counting his money before he was even gone. She walked the jury through Uncle Vincent's life, his career, his values, his clarity of mind right up until his death. And then she dropped the bomb. You're going to hear a lot about Gianna Torres during this trial. The plaintiff wants you to believe she's a manipulative person who took advantage of her uncle. So, let me tell you what the evidence will actually show. Gianna Torres, while earning a modest income, secretly paid off her parents' $6.2 million mortgage over 3 years. She did this without their knowledge. She did this without expectation of repayment. She did this because she loved them and didn't want them to lose their home. I watched the jury's faces change. Confusion turned to surprise, turning to something that looked like respect. The parents who are now suing her, Patricia continued, the parents who claim she's selfish and manipulative owe their home to her generosity. And they didn't even know about it until after they'd already decided to disown her for refusing to hand over an inheritance that was never theirs to begin with. The first week of trial was mostly technical. Medical experts testified about Uncle Vincent's cognitive state. Dr. Helena Shaw, his oncologist, explained that despite his cancer, Vincent's mind had remained sharp until the end. I had extensive conversations with Mr. Torres in the months before his death, Dr. Shaw testified. He was reading complex literature, engaging in philosophical debates with me during his treatments, making sophisticated jokes. There was no cognitive decline whatsoever. Rebecca tried to poke holes in this, suggesting the medications might have caused intermittent confusion. Dr. Shaw shut it down firmly. If Vincent Torres had shown any signs of impaired judgment, I would have documented it immediately. It's part of my ethical obligation. There was nothing to document. Gerald Patterson testified about the will, explaining how carefully it had been constructed, how many conversations he'd had with Uncle Vincent about his wishes. Vincent was very clear, Gerald said. He wanted Gianna to have everything because she was the only one who cared about him as a person, not as a bank account. He used those exact words. Rebecca's cross-examination was aggressive. Isn't it true that Gianna Torres had multiple private meetings with Vincent Torres in your office in the months before his death? Yes. And isn't it true that you can't know what was said during those meetings? I can know, Gerald replied calmly, because I was present for all of them. Vincent asked me to witness their conversations specifically to avoid allegations like the ones being made now. Gianna never once discussed the will or inheritance with Vincent in my presence. They talked about literature, about her work, about his memories. Normal family conversations. I could see Rebecca's frustration building. Every witness undermined her narrative. Then came the character witnesses. My father's old business associates testified about what a family man James Torres was, how devoted to his children. It was surreal, listening to strangers describe a father I'd never known. But Patricia's cross-examinations were surgical. "Mr. Hendricks, you testified that James Torres is a devoted father. How many times did you see him interact with his daughter, Gianna?" "Well, I'm not sure I ever met her, actually." "You never met her. But you're certain he was devoted to her?" "I know he talked about his son quite a bit." "His son. Right. What about his daughter?" "I can't recall specific conversations." This pattern repeated with every character witness. They all knew Ethan. None of them had ever met me, heard about me, or could recall my father saying anything about me at all. The prosecution rested on day 8. Patricia stood and called her first witness, Ethan Torres. My brother walked to the stand looking nervous but determined. He'd cut his hair, bought a proper suit, and there was something different in his bearing. Confidence, maybe, or just the relief of someone who'd finally stopped pretending. Patricia's questions were gentle, building a picture of our family dynamic through Ethan's eyes. "Did your father treat you and your sister differently growing up?" "Very differently," Ethan said. "I was the golden child. Everything I did was celebrated, even when I failed. Gianna was held to impossible standards and criticized constantly, even when she succeeded. Can you give an example?" "Sure. When I dropped out of college the first time, Dad said I was finding my path and gave me $50,000 to start a business. When Gianna graduated summa cum laude with her bachelor's degree, he didn't even attend the ceremony. Said it was too far to drive." I watched the jury's faces. They weren't happy. "Mr. Torres, do you believe your sister manipulated your uncle?" "No, absolutely not. Gianna loved Uncle Vincent genuinely. She visited him because she wanted to, not because she expected anything. If anything, I'm the one who should be ashamed. I barely visited him unless I needed something." Rebecca's cross-examination tried to suggest Ethan was lying to protect me, that we'd coordinated our testimony. Ethan handled it beautifully. "Ma'am, I spent most of my life watching my father give me everything while my sister got nothing. I'm not protecting Gianna. I'm finally telling the truth." The next witness was Caroline Webb from Sterling Bank and Trust. She walked through the mortgage payment history, displaying each transaction on a screen for the jury to see. "Ms. Torres set up these payments to appear as if they were coming from her parents' account," Caroline explained. "She wanted them to feel they were succeeding on their own." "And did Mr. and Mrs. Torres know Gianna was making these payments?" "No. They had no idea until she sent them the cancellation notice after they'd disowned her." Patricia displayed the text message. "You're dead to us!" This message was sent 3 days before Gianna informed her parents that she'd paid off their mortgage? That's correct. So she saved their home and they didn't know it, and they threw her away anyway? Yes, the courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked moved. Rebecca tried to salvage it. "Ms. Webb, isn't it unusual for someone to pay off another person's debt without their knowledge?" "It's generous," Caroline replied. "Extraordinarily generous, but not unusual in the sense of being suspicious. If Gianna had wanted something in return, she would have told them she was doing it. The fact that she kept it secret for 3 years shows it was a genuine gift." My father's face was red. I could see him whispering urgently to Rebecca, gesturing angrily. She kept shaking her head, trying to calm him down. Then Patricia called me to the stand. I'd been dreading this moment for months. Being questioned by Patricia would be fine, but Rebecca's cross-examination would be brutal. She'd try to break me, to make me seem cold or calculating or rehearsed. Patricia's direct examination took 2 hours. She walked me through my childhood, my relationship with Uncle Vincent, my career, my decision to pay the mortgage. I tried to stay calm, factual, letting the story speak for itself. "Why did you pay off your parents' mortgage?" Patricia asked. "Because I loved them," I said simply. "Because I didn't want them to lose their home. Because I thought if I could fix this one thing, maybe everything else would get better between us." "And did it?" "No, they never knew I did it. So it couldn't fix anything. I realize now that nothing I could have done would have been enough." "Why not?" "Because they didn't want a daughter. They wanted someone who would do what they said, fund what they wanted, be who they expected. And I couldn't be that person anymore. Rebecca's cross-examination was exactly as harsh as I'd expected. Ms. Torres, you claim you loved your parents, yet you refused to share your inheritance with them. The inheritance wasn't mine to share. It was Uncle Vincent's, and he was very clear about his wishes. But surely you could have chosen to give them some of it. I could have. But they'd already told me I was dead to them. You don't get to disown someone and then demand their money. That seems rather vindictive. No, it's called having boundaries, something I should have learned decades ago. Rebecca tried several angles, suggesting I was lying about the mortgage payments, implying I'd manipulated Uncle Vincent through emotional abuse, claiming I was motivated by greed. I countered each one calmly with evidence. Bank statements for the mortgage payments, Uncle Vincent's letter, testimony from his doctors and friends. Finally, frustrated, Rebecca asked, "Do you feel any guilt at all about destroying your family?" I looked at my father for the first time since the trial began. He stared back, his face hard and angry and utterly convinced of his own righteousness. "I didn't destroy my family," I said quietly. "My family destroyed itself a long time ago. I just stopped pretending otherwise." The trial lasted 3 weeks total. Closing arguments happened on a Friday afternoon, both attorneys making their final pitches to the exhausted jury. Rebecca painted me as a villain. Patricia painted me as a survivor. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the forewoman, the retired postal worker, a black woman in her 60s with kind eyes, read the verdict. "We find in favor of the defendant, Gianna Torres on all counts." I felt Patricia's hand squeeze my shoulder. I felt the weight of months of stress lift slightly. But mostly I felt empty. We'd won. The inheritance was secure. My father's lawsuit was dismissed. But sitting in that courtroom, watching my father's face crumple in defeat, I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Sad for the family we could have been. Sad for the father who'd chosen pride over love. Sad for the years I'd wasted trying to earn something that should have been freely given. The judge awarded me legal fees, which meant my father would have to pay Patricia's substantial bill on top of his own. The house sale would barely cover it. Torres commercial real estate was finished. As we filed out of the courtroom, my father finally looked at me. Really looked at me. And for just a moment I saw something in his eyes that might have been regret. But then Rebecca was pulling him away, and the moment was gone, and I was left standing in the hallway with Patricia and Gerald and Adrienne, who'd come for the verdict. "How do you feel?" Adrienne asked. "Relieved," I said, "and completely exhausted." "Understandable. Come on, we're taking you to dinner. You need to celebrate." "I don't feel much like celebrating." "Then we're taking you to dinner so you can decompress. Either way, you're not going home alone tonight." That evening, sitting in a restaurant with the people who'd actually shown up for me, I realized something important. I'd spent 38 years trying to earn my family's love. But I'd already had love. From Uncle Vincent. From Adrienne. From people like Patricia and Gerald and Caroline Webb who'd gone above and beyond because they believed in me. Family wasn't about blood. It was about who showed up, and I was done chasing people who wouldn't. 3 months after the trial, I bought a house, not in Connecticut. Not anywhere near my parents or the life I'd tried so hard to fit into. I bought a small cottage in the Catskills, 2 hours north of the city, with 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and 5 acres of land that backed up to a forest. It cost $600,000, a fraction of what I could have spent, but it was exactly what I needed. Space to breathe, quiet to think, a place that was entirely, completely mine. Ethan helped me move in on a Saturday in December. He'd finished his first semester back at Southern Connecticut State, pulling straight A's for the first time in his life. He was studying business administration, but this time with a focus on nonprofit management. "I spent so many years trying to get rich quick," he told me as we carried boxes up the porch steps. "Now I just want to do something that matters." "That's growth," I said. "Yeah, well, watching your life implode because of greed is pretty motivating." He set down a box labeled kitchen and looked around at the property. This place is perfect, Gianna. Really perfect. It feels like home, I said, and I meant it. We spent the day unpacking, setting up furniture, making the cottage livable. Adrienne arrived around noon with groceries and wine, declaring that no housewarming was complete without a proper meal. "You're 2 hours from civilization," she said, surveying the rural surroundings with good-natured skepticism. "What are you going to do out here all alone?" "Right," I said. "I got accepted into Columbia's MFA program. I start in January." Adrienne's face lit up. "Gianna, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell me you applied?" "I wasn't sure I'd get in. And I wasn't sure I'd have the courage to actually go, even if I did." I looked around at the cottage, at the life I was building. But I'm done living for other people's expectations. This is what I want. What about Morrison? I'm going part-time. Bill was surprisingly supportive. Said he'd rather have me happy and part-time than miserable and full-time. I'll work remotely 3 days a week and focus on school the other days. That evening, the three of us sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, drinking wine and watching the sun set over the mountains. It was cold, almost winter, but the sky was clear and the stars were starting to appear, more than I'd ever seen in Brooklyn. "Have you heard from your parents?" Ethan asked carefully. "No, have you?" "Mom calls sometimes. She's living with her sister in Boston now. She and Dad are separated." This was news. "When did that happen?" "Last month. After the house was sold and the legal fees were paid, there was barely anything left. Dad wanted to use what remained to restart Torres Commercial. Mom said she was done. She took her half and left. How is she?" "Sad, regretful. She asks about you constantly. I want to know if you're okay, if you'd ever consider talking to her." I sipped my wine, thinking about my mother. Elena Torres, who'd stood by silently while my father tore our family apart. Who'd chosen comfort over courage, loyalty to her husband over protection of her daughter. "Maybe someday," I said, "but not yet. She made her choices. Now she has to live with them." "That's fair," Ethan said. "For what it's worth, I think she knows she was wrong. She told me she should have stood up for you years ago. Knowing you were wrong and actually making amends are different things." "Yeah, they are." We sat in comfortable silence, the kind of quiet that only comes when people have been through hell together and survived. "What about Dad?" I finally asked. Ethan's expression darkened. Still angry. Still convinced he was right. He's living in a rental in Bridgeport, working for someone else's commercial real estate firm. It's killing him, being an employee after running his own company for 30 years. But he won't admit any of it was his fault. Some people never do. "No," Ethan agreed. "They don't. Christmas came and went. I spent it in the cottage with Adrienne and her husband, making too much food and watching old movies. It was the first Christmas in my entire life that didn't involve obligation, guilt, or criticism. It was peaceful. I started my MFA program in January. The classes were challenging, exhilarating, exactly what I'd been craving. For the first time since college, I was in rooms full of people who valued ideas over money, who measured success by growth instead of profit. My professor, Dr. Judith Chen, pulled me aside after the first workshop. "Your piece about the house," she said. "The one about watching your inheritance burn. It's raw, painful, really exceptional." "Thank you," I said, surprised. "Have you considered expanding it? There's a real memoir here, the kind that might help other people dealing with family dysfunction. A memoir." The idea terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. Putting my story out into the world, letting strangers see the ugliest parts of my family and my own desperate attempts to fix what was broken. "I'll think about it," I said. But I was already thinking about it. Already outlining chapters in my head. In March, I got an unexpected visitor at the cottage. I was in my makeshift office, the spare bedroom I'd converted into a writing space, when I heard a car pull up. Through the window, I saw my mother's silver sedan. My first instinct was to not answer the door. But curiosity, or maybe something like hope, made me walk downstairs and open it. Elena Torres stood on my porch looking older than I remembered. She'd lost weight, her hair had become more gray, and there were new lines around her eyes. She held a bouquet of flowers. Daisy's my favorite, and looked terrified. "Hi, sweetheart," she said quietly. "Mom. I know I should have called first, but I was afraid you'd say no. Ethan gave me your address. I hope that's okay." I didn't invite her in right away. We stood there in the doorway, 3 months of silence between us. "What do you want?" I asked, not unkindly, to apologize. "To tell you I was wrong. To see if there's any chance—" She trailed off, tears gathering in her eyes. "To see if there's any chance you might forgive me someday." I stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in." We sat at my kitchen table, tea steaming between us. Mom looked around at the cottage with something like wonder. "This is lovely, Gianna. Really lovely. Thank you. Ethan told me you're in a graduate program. For writing?" "Yes, creative writing. I'm working on a memoir about us. About the family. About everything that happened." I watched her process this. Worry flickered across her face, but then something else. Resignation, maybe. Acceptance. "You should write it," she said. "You should tell your story, even the parts that make me look bad." "Especially those parts," I said gently. "I know." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "Gianna, I need you to understand something. What I did, standing by while your father treated you the way he did, there's no excuse for it. I was scared of being alone, of financial instability, of having to start over. So I chose comfort over courage. I chose him over you, and I will regret that for the rest of my life." "Why now?" I asked. "Why tell me this now?" "Because losing you made me realize I'd never really had you. Not the way I should have. I was so busy trying to keep your father happy, trying to maintain this image of a perfect family, that I sacrificed the one person who actually deserved my protection." Tears were falling now, unchecked. "You were such a good daughter. Such a kind, brilliant, generous person, and I took that for granted. I let him make you feel small and worthless when you were anything but." I felt my own eyes burning. "You let him text me that I was dead to the family. You knew he did it, and you said nothing. I know. You chose the house over me, over your own daughter. I know. And now you want forgiveness because you finally left him? Because things got hard and you decided you were done?" Mom flinched but didn't look away. "No, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see what I did. I see how badly I failed you, and I'm sorry." We sat in silence for a long time. I thought about all the years of trying to earn her love, all the times I'd excused her silence, all the ways I'd convinced myself that she was trapped and couldn't help me. But she could have helped me. She'd chosen not to. "I'm not ready to forgive you," I said finally. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready. I understand. But I'm willing to talk. Sometimes, if you're willing to actually show up. Not just with words, but with actions. With consistency. With effort." Hope flickered in her eyes. "I can do that. I will do that." "We'll see," I said. She left an hour later, promising to call, to visit again if I'd allow it. I watched her car disappear down the long driveway and felt something complicated and unresolved settling in my chest. Maybe forgiveness wasn't binary. Maybe it wasn't all or nothing. Maybe it was something you built slowly, carefully, with evidence and time. Or maybe I'd never forgive her completely, and that was okay too. In April, I got a letter from my father's attorney. Not Rebecca Stanton. She'd apparently dropped him as a client after the trial. This was someone local, handling what remained of his affairs. Inside was a single document. A quitclaim deed, transferring ownership of Uncle Vincent's cabin in Vermont to me. There was no note. No explanation. Just the deed, signed by James Torres, notarized and official. I called Ethan. "Did you know about this? The cabin?" "Yeah. Dad called me a few weeks ago. Said he wanted to contest Uncle Vincent's will again, but the cabin was separate. It was in Vincent's name, but Dad thought he could claim it as family property. His lawyer told him it was pointless. It was clearly yours, and that pursuing it would just cost more money he didn't have. So he's giving it to me? I think he's accepting reality. Finally, Or maybe he just doesn't want any more reminders of what he lost. I drove up to Vermont the following weekend to see the cabin. It was rustic, beautiful, nestled in the woods near a lake. Uncle Vincent had bought it decades ago as a retreat, a place to escape and think and write. There were bookshelves built into every wall, still filled with his collection. First editions of Hemingway, Faulkner, Morrison, modern novels mixed with classics, poetry collections and philosophy texts and everything in between. I found a photo on the mantel. Uncle Vincent and me, taken during one of my visits 5 years ago. We were both laughing at something, caught mid-conversation, completely at ease with each other. I sat in his reading chair and cried. Not for what I'd lost with my parents, but for what I'd had with him. For the love that had been real and unconditional and freely given. Thank you, I whispered to the empty cabin. Thank you for seeing me. The MFA program finished in May. I'd completed a full draft of my memoir, 200 pages about family, inheritance, sacrifice, and learning to value yourself. My professors encouraged me to find an agent to pursue publication. This story needs to be told, Dr. Chen said. Too many people are trapped in toxic family dynamics, convinced they're obligated to set themselves on fire to keep others warm. Your story gives them permission to stop. I started querying agents in June. By August, I had representation. By October, I had a book deal. The Inheritance, a memoir of family, money, and finding myself, would be published the following spring. Ethan threw me a celebration dinner at his new apartment in New Haven. He'd graduated with honors, started working for a nonprofit that helped small businesses in underserved communities. He'd found his calling finally. I'm so proud of you, he said, raising his glass. For everything. For standing up for yourself. For building this life. For refusing to let them break you. I'm proud of you too, I said. For doing the same. We clinked glasses. Two siblings who'd finally found each other after years of being pitted against one another by parents who didn't know how to love without conditions. The book came out in April, almost 2 years to the day after Uncle Vincent's death. It made several bestseller lists. I did interviews, podcast appearances, speaking engagements. People wrote to me sharing their own stories of family dysfunction, of choosing themselves, of learning that blood doesn't obligate you to accept mistreatment. I heard through Ethan that my father had read it. He'd told Ethan it was full of lies and exaggerations, but he'd read every word. My mother read it too. She called me afterward, crying. I'm so sorry, she said. Reading it from your perspective, seeing how much you were hurting all those years. I'm so sorry, Gianna. We had lunch the following week, and the week after that, slowly, carefully, we were building something new. Not the mother-daughter relationship I'd wanted as a child, but something honest. Something real. I turned 40 in October. I celebrated at the cottage with 24 friends, people from my writing program, my literacy center, my neighborhood. Adrienne and her husband, Ethan and his new girlfriend, even my mother, who brought homemade empanadas and spent the evening laughing with people who actually loved me. Standing on my porch, watching people I'd chosen to have in my life enjoy each other's company, I felt something I'd spent 40 years chasing, peace. I thought about Uncle Vincent's letter, the one that had started everything. Use this money to build the life you deserve, he'd written. I'd done exactly that. Not the life my father wanted for me. Not the life I'd thought I was supposed to want. But the life I actually deserved. One filled with creativity, purpose, authentic relationships, and the freedom to be fully, completely myself. The inheritance hadn't just been money. It had been granted. Permission to stop apologizing for existing. Permission to set boundaries. Permission to choose myself. And I'd finally, gratefully, accepted it. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, I sat alone on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. I read your book. You were right about everything. I was a terrible father. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you that while it still mattered. James Torres. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond, to acknowledge it, to maybe open a door. but a wiser part. The part that had learned painful lessons about valuing myself, knew better. Some apologies come too late. Some damage can't be undone with words. I deleted the message and went inside to my cottage, to my books, to my life, the one I'd built from the ashes of the one I'd tried so hard to fix. And I was, finally, genuinely happy. 5 years later, I'm sitting in the Vermont cabin working on my third book. The first memoir led to a second one about recovery and rebuilding. This third book is fiction, my first novel, about a family that learns too late what they've thrown away. Ethan visits monthly. He's married now with a baby on the way. He's asked me to be the godmother. I said yes. My mother and I have lunch twice a month. Our relationship isn't perfect, but it's honest. She's in therapy, working through her own patterns of codependency and fear. I'm proud of her for doing the work, even if it's decades late. I haven't spoken to my father since the trial. I heard he remarried last year, a woman with money, apparently. Ethan says he's still angry, still convinced he was wronged. Some people never change, and that's okay. I don't need him to change. I don't need his approval or his apology or his love. I spent 40 years chasing those things and they almost destroyed me. Instead, I have what actually matters: self-respect, chosen family, work that fulfills me, and the knowledge that I'm enough exactly as I am. The inheritance Uncle Vincent left me wasn't just the money, though that certainly helped. It was the gift of seeing myself clearly, of understanding my worth, of having the resources and permission to build a life on my own terms. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what people leave you in their will. It's what they teach you about your own value while they're still alive. Uncle Vincent taught me I was worth loving, worth investing in, worth believing in, and that lesson was worth far more than $8 million. The call came on a Tuesday morning in November, 6 years after Uncle Vincent's death. I was in the Vermont cabin, working on revisions for my novel, when my phone rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," I answered. "Everything okay?" "It's Dad." Ethan's voice was tight. "He had a heart attack. He's in the hospital in Bridgeport." "It's bad, Gianna." I set down my coffee cup carefully, processing the information. "My father, a heart attack. Bad. Is he going to make it?" I asked. "They don't know yet. He's in surgery now. His wife called me. She thought you should know. Should I know? After 6 years of silence? After everything that had happened? Are you going to see him?" I asked. "I'm driving up now. I know it's complicated, but he's still our father. If you want to come, I'll wait for you." I looked around the cabin. My laptop is full of words about forgiveness and moving forward. At Uncle Vincent's books lining the walls. The life I'd built in the aftermath of my family's destruction. "I'll meet you there," I said. The drive to Bridgeport took 3 hours. I had plenty of time to think about what I'd say if my father survived, what I'd feel if he didn't, whether any of it mattered anymore. The hospital was standard: fluorescent lights, antiseptic smell, worried families clustered in waiting rooms. Ethan was already there, sitting with a woman I didn't recognize. She was younger than my father by at least 15 years, blonde and polished in a way that suggested money. "Gianna," Ethan stood and hugged me. "This is Vanessa. Dad's wife." Vanessa extended a manicured hand. "Thank you for coming. James has mentioned you." I wondered what version of me lived in my father's stories. Probably not a flattering one. "How is he?" I asked, still in surgery. "The doctors say the next few hours are critical." Vanessa twisted her wedding ring nervously. "He's been under so much stress. The business, the finances. I kept telling him to slow down, but he wouldn't listen." Of course he wouldn't. James Torres had never listened to anyone. We sat in uncomfortable silence. Ethan filled me in on details. Dad had collapsed at work, rushed to the hospital, emergency surgery to clear a blocked artery. Vanessa had called Ethan immediately. "Mom was in Boston, but she'd sent flowers. Does he know I'm here?" I asked Ethan quietly. "No. He was unconscious when they brought him in." 2 hours later, a surgeon emerged, Dr. Patel, exhausted but professional. "The surgery went as well as could be expected," he said. "We cleared the blockage and restored blood flow. but there was significant damage to the heart muscle. The next 24 hours will tell us more about his prognosis. Can we see him? Vanessa asked. He's in recovery. The family can see him briefly once he's moved to the ICU, but he needs rest. No stress, no difficult conversations. No stress. No difficult conversations, which meant I probably shouldn't be there at all. They moved him to the ICU around 7 that evening. Vanessa went in first, then Ethan. I stayed in the waiting room, scrolling through my phone, wondering why I'd come at all. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Ms. Torres, your father is asking for you. My stomach clenched. He's awake? Semi-conscious. But he's been saying your name. If you'd like to see him, now would be the time. I followed her through the sterile corridors to a room filled with beeping machines and the steady hiss of oxygen. My father lay in the bed, looking small in a way I'd never seen before. James Torres, who'd always seemed so large, so commanding, reduced to a pale figure tangled in tubes and wires. His eyes opened when I approached. For a moment, he seemed confused, like he couldn't quite believe I was real. Gianna, he whispered, his voice raspy from the breathing tube they'd removed. Hi. Dad, you came, Ethan called. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were wet. I read your book. All 3 of them. This surprised me. I'd assumed he'd only read the first one, the memoir that had painted him so unfavorably. The second one, he continued, struggling to speak, about rebuilding after trauma. There was a line that stayed with me. You wrote, "The hardest apologies are the ones we owe ourselves for staying too long in places that hurt us." I remembered writing that line. It had been about me, about the years I'd wasted trying to earn his love. I should have apologized sooner, Dad said. Years ago, before the lawsuit. Before I said you were dead to us. Before I made you feel worthless your entire life. Dad, you need to rest. No. He gripped my hand with surprising strength. I might not get another chance to say this, so I need to say it now. I was wrong. About everything. About you. About what mattered. About what makes someone valuable. Tears were falling now, unchecked. My father, who I'd never seen cry, who'd always been granite and steel, was crying. You were the best of all of us, he whispered. You worked hard, built something real, and gave without expectation. And I treated you like you were nothing because you wouldn't be what I wanted you to be. Why? I asked the question I'd carried for 40 years, finally finding a voice. Why wasn't I enough? You were always enough. More than enough. I couldn't see it. I was so focused on legacy, on the Torres name, on building an empire. I thought Ethan would carry that forward. And when he couldn't, when he kept failing, I blamed you somehow for being different. For showing me what success actually looked like when it wasn't on my terms. That doesn't make sense. I know. None of it makes sense. I destroyed my family chasing something that didn't matter. And by the time I realized it, I'd lost everything worth keeping. We sat in silence, machines beeping steadily around us. The mortgage, Dad said. $6 million. You saved our house and I didn't even know. I didn't even notice that suddenly we could make payments we couldn't afford. I just assumed. I don't even know what I assumed. That we'd figured it out somehow. I wanted to help. You did more than help. You sacrificed everything. And I repaid you by suing you, by calling you selfish, by cutting you out of my life. He coughed, wincing in pain. Vincent was right about you. He saw what I couldn't. That you were the only one worth leaving everything to. Dad? I'm not asking for forgiveness, he interrupted. I don't deserve it. I just need you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see what I lost. And I'm sorry. The apology hung between us, heavy with decades of damage. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. You hurt me so deeply for so long. You made me feel like I had to earn love through achievement, through sacrifice, through being someone I wasn't. And even when I did everything right, it was never enough. I know. You texted me that I was dead to you. Over money. Money that wasn't even yours. I know. You sued me. Put me through a trial. Made my pain public. I know. He was sobbing now, quiet and broken. I know what I did. And I'll die knowing I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too proud and stupid to see her value. Something in me cracked. Not forgiveness exactly, but something softer than the anger I'd carried. You're not going to die, I said. Not today. Dr. Patel says you'll recover if you take care of yourself. And then what? I go back to my small apartment and my job working for someone else and my new wife who married me thinking I had money? I lost everything, Gianna. Torres commercial is gone. The house is gone. My children barely speak to me. My brother's gone. Everything I built turned to dust. That's what happens when you build on a foundation of pride and cruelty. He flinched but nodded. You're right. You've always been right. I stood to leave. I need to think about all this. About what, if anything, comes next. Will you come back? He asked. And there was such naked hope in his voice that it hurt. Maybe. I don't know yet. But Dad, if I do come back, if we ever have a relationship again, it has to be real. No more games. No more conditions. No more measuring my worth by your standards. Agreed. Anything you want. I don't want anything from you, I said softly. That's the point. I don't need your approval or your money or your validation. I'm 46 years old and I've built a good life without any of those things. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be because you actually want to know me, not because you need something. I do want to know you, he said. I want to know the woman you became despite me, not because of me. I left him there, processing everything. In the waiting room, Ethan looked up anxiously. How did it go? He apologized. I really apologized. I took responsibility for everything. Do you believe him? I think he believes he means it. Whether he can actually follow through, whether he can be different. I don't know. Vanessa appeared, wringing her hands. The nurse said he's asking for both of you now. He wants to talk to us together. Back in the ICU room, Dad looked exhausted but more alert. Vanessa, he said, I need to tell you something. About the prenup. About the finances. Vanessa's face went pale. James, you need to rest. No, I need to be honest. Finally, completely honest. He looked at Ethan and me. I married Vanessa under false pretenses. I led her to believe I still had money, that Torres Commercial was just going through a rough patch. The truth is I'm broke. The business is bankrupt. All I have is my salary from the firm where I work and this mounting hospital debt. Vanessa sat down heavily. You lied to me? Yes, and I'm sorry. If you want an annulment, I'll understand. You signed up for someone who could provide security, and I'm not that person anymore. I watched this unfold with a strange sense of déjà vu. My father, once again, is facing the consequences of his choices. But here's the thing, Dad continued, looking at me. I don't want to die knowing I lied to everyone I claimed to love. Gianna spent years trying to save me from myself. She paid off a mortgage I couldn't afford. She tried to earn my love through sacrifice. And I threw it back in her face. I won't make that mistake again. Vanessa was crying now. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. About whether you want to stay with a broken old man who has nothing to offer except honesty and effort. Dad turned back to me and Ethan. And you two. My children. I'm asking, not demanding, but asking if you'd be willing to give me a chance. Not to fix the past. That's impossible. But to build something new. Something honest. Ethan looked at me. I looked at my father, at this man who'd caused so much pain but was finally, genuinely, taking responsibility. Therapy, I said finally. If we're going to try this, you need to be in therapy. Real therapy, not just going through the motions. Okay. And boundaries. When I say no, I mean no. When I say I need space, you respect it. No more manipulation or guilt trips. Agreed. And you have to build a relationship with me based on who I actually am, not who you wanted me to be. That's all I want now, Dad said. To know my daughter. The real one. The one I was too blind to see. I looked at Ethan. He nodded slightly. We'll try, I said. Slowly, carefully, one conversation at a time. But if you fall back into old patterns, I'm done. For good this time. I understand. Dad recovered over the next few weeks. The damage to his heart was permanent. He'd need medication and lifestyle changes for life. But he survived. True to his word, he started therapy. Dr. Marcus Rivera, a specialist in family systems and trauma. Dad saw him twice a week, working through decades of toxic patterns. We started with phone calls, brief, superficial conversations about weather and health. Then longer calls, deeper topics. Dad asked about my writing and actually listened to the answers. Asked about my life in Vermont, what I did for joy, what mattered to me. It was strange, building a relationship with a parent at 46. Like learning a language you should have spoken fluently, but somehow never learned. 3 months after the heart attack, Dad asked if he could visit the cottage. I almost said no. The cottage was my sanctuary, my space, untainted by family dysfunction, but Ethan encouraged me. He's really trying, Gianna. I see him twice a month and he's different. Not perfect, but different, so I said yes. Dad arrived on a Saturday in February, driving carefully in his modest sedan, a far cry from the luxury cars he'd once insisted on. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes were clearer somehow. Less angry. I gave him a tour of the cottage, watching him take in my bookshelves, my writing space, and the photos of my chosen family on the walls. "This is wonderful," he said quietly. "It's so completely you." "You barely know me," I said, not unkindly. "How would you know what me?" "That's fair. But I'm learning. Your books helped. They showed me who you became when I wasn't paying attention." We sat on the porch drinking coffee, watching winter birds at the feeder. "I sold my wedding ring," Dad said suddenly. "The one from my marriage to your mother. I'd kept it all these years, even after the divorce. Vanessa didn't know. I sold it last week and donated the money to that literacy center you volunteer at. The one in the Bronx," I stared at him. "Why?" "Because you gave 3 years of your life and $6 million trying to save me. The least I can do is support something you care about. It wasn't much, $5,000, but it's a start. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Not to buy forgiveness. Just to show you I'm listening, that I see what matters to you." We talked for hours that day. About his childhood, his relationship with Uncle Vincent, the pressure he'd felt to be successful. About his regrets with Mom, his failures with Ethan, his cruelty toward me. "I was raised to believe love had to be earned," Dad said. "My father was like that. Cold, demanding, impossible to please. I swore I wouldn't be like him. And then I became exactly like him." "You can't blame your father for your choices," I said. "At some point, you have to take responsibility." "You're right. And I am. That's what therapy is teaching me. That I had a choice every single time I criticized you. Every time I ignored your achievements. Every time I made you feel small. I chose cruelty. And I'm sorry." The apology still felt fragile, like ice forming on a lake, present but not yet solid enough to trust. But it was something. Over the next year, Dad and I built a cautious relationship. He came to a reading when my novel launched. He sent thoughtful texts about articles he'd read that reminded him of my work. He showed up consistently without asking for anything in return. Vanessa stayed with him. They went to couples therapy, rebuilt their marriage on honesty instead of illusions. She turned out to be stronger than anyone had given her credit for. Mom and Dad even had coffee once, a meeting brokered by Ethan. They weren't friends, and would never be friends. But they managed civility, even warmth for their children's sake, and slowly, painfully, impossibly, our family began to heal. Not back to what it was. That family had been toxic, built on dysfunction and conditional love, but into something new, something honest. On the 7th anniversary of Uncle Vincent's death, I drove to his grave. I brought flowers and sat on the grass, talking to him like I used to. "I think you'd be proud of me," I said. "I used the inheritance the way you wanted. Built a life I love. Learned my worth. Even started letting Dad back in, though I know that would surprise you." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of early spring. Thank you, I whispered, for seeing me when no one else did, for giving me permission to value myself, for loving me without conditions. You saved me, Uncle Vincent, in every way that matters. I left the flowers and drove home to my cottage, to my life, to the family I'd chosen and the family I was carefully, cautiously, rebuilding. The inheritance had been $8 million, but the real gift was simpler and more profound. The knowledge that I was worthy of love, worthy of respect, worthy of taking up space in the world. And no one could ever take that from me again. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.